In the year 21 to 37, humanity's long-held dreams of contact with alien life finally came true, though not in the way anyone had imagined. The massive Axorian ships appeared suddenly in Earth's orbit one quiet Tuesday morning, causing panic that quickly turned to wonder as they broadcast peaceful intentions in perfect English, Mandarin, and dozens of other Earth languages. The Axorians, with their tall, slender bodies and iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions, claimed to represent a galactic civilization spanning thousands of star systems. They spoke of trade, cultural exchange, and welcoming Earth into a broader community of intelligent species. Most humans were captivated by their advanced technology, ships that seemed to defy physics, medical techniques that could cure diseases humans still struggled with, and energy sources that made Earth's nuclear power look like rubbing sticks together for fire. World leaders agreed to diplomatic relations after weeks of careful negotiations. The Axorians were generous with their knowledge but selective, offering glimpses of their capabilities while holding back the truly revolutionary technologies. They established an embassy in Geneva and invited Earth to do the same on their homeworld Axoria Prime, a planet they described as the jewel of their empire, orbiting a star 83 light-years from Earth. "We should send someone who can truly understand them," said Dr. Han during the International Selection Committee meeting. "Not just a politician or scientist, but someone who can grasp the nuances of their language and culture." That someone turned out to be Ji-Woo Kim, a 19-year-old linguistics prodigy from Seoul National University who had already mastered the complex tonal patterns of Axorian speech better than the translation computers. Ji-Woo had grown up fascinated by languages, teaching herself English, Japanese, and Russian before she turned 10. When the Axorians arrived, she devoted herself to understanding their language, quickly discovering patterns that others missed. "I don't just want to speak their words," Ji-Woo told her parents when she applied for the exchange program. "I want to understand how they think, how they see the universe. Their language has 15 tenses. They experience time differently than we do." Her selection made global headlines. "Earth's ambassador is a teenager," proclaimed news outlets, some questioning the wisdom of sending someone so young. But those who had seen Ji-Woo analyze and adapt to the complex Axorian language knew she was the right choice. The day of departure came with global celebrations. Ji-Woo stood at the boarding ramp of the Axorian shuttle, her small frame dwarfed by the alien vessel. She wore a simple blue uniform designed for the mission, her long black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Though nervous, her eyes sparkled with excitement as cameras from around the world recorded her final wave before boarding. "I go not just for Korea, not just for Earth, but for all of humanity's future among the stars," she said in her departure speech, words that would later be inscribed on monuments. The journey to Axoria Prime took 3 weeks in the Axorian vessel, traveling at speeds Earth scientists could only dream about. Ji-Woo spent the time deepening her understanding of Axorian language and customs with the help of Koltar, her assigned guide. The tall Axorian seemed genuinely fond of the human girl, impressed by how quickly she picked up subtleties even their translation devices missed. "How your kind learns quickly," Koltar noted one day, their skin shifting to a pleased blue-green, perhaps too quickly for some of our council's comfort. Ji-Woo laughed this off as a joke, not recognizing the warning hidden in those words. Axoria Prime stunned her when they arrived, a world of sweeping crystal cities and forests of plants that responded to music by changing colors. The Axorians had transformed their entire planet into a blend of technology and nature that worked in harmony. Ji-Woo was given quarters in the diplomatic district, a spacious apartment with views of the twin moons and accommodations adjusted for human comfort. The first months went well. Ji-Woo sent regular reports back to Earth, describing Axorian art, science, and philosophy. She became something of a celebrity among the Axorians, who found her curiosity and quick mind refreshing. Children would follow her in public places, fascinated by her different appearance. Some Axorian scientists even requested her input on their studies of Earth culture. "They see beauty differently than we do," she told her parents during one communication session. "They can perceive colors we can't even imagine, but when I showed them Earth's sunsets, Several of them experienced what they call the Great Stillness, their version of being moved to tears. What Jiwoo didn't know was that behind the scenes, the Axorian High Council was engaged in heated debates about Earth. Most alien species the Axorians encountered were either pre-spaceflight civilizations they could easily dominate, or advanced, enough to be treated as equals. Humans fell uncomfortably in between, technologically inferior but advancing at an alarming rate. During her third month on Axoria Prime, Jiwoo was working late in the embassy archives when she accidentally accessed files not meant for human eyes. The translation was incomplete, but she understood enough. Earth had been classified as a resource acquisition target, essentially marking it for eventual colonization. The files contained assessments of Earth's mineral wealth, discussions of human biological vulnerabilities, and timeframes for what they called integration, a euphemism for conquest. Jiwoo's heart pounded as she copied the files. She had to warn Earth. These weren't the peaceful ambassadors they claimed to be. The entire exchange program might be nothing more than reconnaissance for invasion. She didn't make it back to her quarters that night. The moon cast an eerie glow through the windows of the Axorian Central Archives as Jiwoo stared at her screen in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she transferred the classified files to her personal data device. The documents were clear. Earth was classified as a resource, acquisition target, with detailed plans for what the Axorians called integration, but was actually invasion and colonization. "They've been lying to us all along," she whispered to herself, eyes darting nervously to the doorway. The embassy was quiet at this late hour, most staff having returned to their quarters. Jiwoo had stayed behind, telling Koltar she wanted to research Axorian poetry for a cultural exchange presentation. She needed to warn Earth immediately. The agreement between Earth and Axoria allowed for weekly direct communication bursts through the quantum relay. The next scheduled transmission was 3 days away, but there was an emergency protocol that allowed immediate communication. She just had to reach the embassy's secure communication center. Jiwoo carefully closed the files and erased her access logs. She took a deep breath, trying to appear calm as she left the archives. The corridors were dimly lit with the bioluminescent panels the Axorians preferred during their night cycle. She walked with purpose, hoping any security monitors would think she was simply heading back to her quarters. Just as she reached the junction that would take her to the communications center, a tall figure stepped out from a side corridor. Working. Late Jiwoo Kim. The voice belonged to Sub-Commander Neklar, head of security for the Axorian High Council. His skin rippled with patterns of orange and red. Colors Jiwoo had learned indicated suspicion and aggression. "Just finishing some research," she replied, forcing a smile. "The history of your poetry traditions is fascinating." Neklar's eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle on his face, narrowed slightly. "Strange that the archives show you accessed files from the Resource Acquisition Division. Not our usual poetry storage." Jiwoo's heart sank. The log erasing hadn't worked, or worse, had triggered an alert. "There must be some mistake. I was only in the cultural archives." "I think not," Neklar said, his voice harder now. "To security." Officers appeared behind him, their hands resting on the smooth metallic devices Jiwoo knew were weapons. "Your data device, please." For a split second, Jiwoo considered running. But where would she go on an alien world? Instead, she reached slowly into her pocket, then suddenly tossed the device down the corridor and sprinted in the opposite direction. "Stop her!" Neklar shouted. Jiwoo ran faster than she ever had in her life, turning corners at random, hoping to lose her pursuers long enough to reach the communication center. She heard the strange whooshing sound of Axorian security forces behind her, their naturally longer legs giving them an advantage. She turned a corner and found herself in a dead end. Before she could turn back, Neklar and his officers blocked her escape. "This is unfortunate," Neklar said, approaching slowly. "You were an excellent cultural ambassador. The High Council had high hopes for you." "Why are you planning to invade Earth?" Jiwoo demanded, her back against the wall. "We came in peace. Your world has resources we need. Your species develops quickly, too quickly to be left alone. It is simply the way of the Empire. Two officers grabbed Jiwoo's arms. Despite her struggles, they dragged her to a sterile white room deep within the security wing. The room contained only a single chair with restraints and several machines Jiwoo didn't recognize. "Protocol demands we learn exactly what you discovered and who you might have told," Neklar explained, his tone now almost apologetic as they secured her to the chair. "Standard truth extraction is quite painless for Axorians." "Please," Jiwoo said, fighting against the panic rising in her chest. "Just let me return to Earth. I won't say anything." "We both know that's not true," Neklar replied. He adjusted settings on one of the machines. "This will be over soon." What the Axorians didn't understand was how different human physiology was from their own. Their truth extraction technology worked by stimulating certain neural pathways while suppressing others, harmless to Axorian brains but devastating to human ones. When the machine activated, Jiwoo's body tensed. Pain like she'd never imagined coursed through her. She couldn't even scream, her vocal cords frozen by the neural intrusion. Neklar frowned as readings on his monitor spiked into dangerous territory. "Something's wrong," he said, typing commands frantically. "Shut it down." But it was too late. By the time they disconnected the equipment, Jiwoo's brain had suffered catastrophic damage. Her body slumped in the chair, eyes staring sightlessly ahead. "This complicates matters," Neklar said after a long silence. "What do we tell the humans?" one of the officers asked. "The truth would be problematic. We'll inform them she contracted an unknown pathogen, something their primitive medical science couldn't have prevented. We'll return the body with our deepest regrets." But what the Axorians didn't know was that Koltar had witnessed everything. The aide had grown fond of the human girl over their months together and had followed her to the archives, concerned about her unusual behavior. He had seen what files she accessed, watched her capture and witnessed her death. And unlike Neklar, Koltar knew enough about humans to know how they would respond when they learned the truth. On a rainy Tuesday morning in Geneva, the Axorian ambassador stood before the United Nations Security Council, his iridescent skin shifting between somber blue and formal purple as he delivered the news of Jiwoo Kim's tragic death. Behind him, a sleek metallic container held what remained of Earth's first ambassador to the stars. "It is with profound regret that we inform you of an unfortunate biological incompatibility," the ambassador said, his three eyes never quite meeting those of the human delegates. "Despite our advanced medical capabilities, we could not save her from the pathogen." The chamber remained silent as he spoke, but in the back row, a slender figure watched with unusual intensity. Hyun-Ki Park, Jiwoo's mentor from Seoul National University, noticed subtle inconsistencies in the Axorian speech patterns Jiwoo herself had documented in her communications. The alien was lying. What the Axorian delegation didn't know was that 17 hours earlier, a message had reached Earth through unofficial channels. Koltar, risking everything, had transmitted the truth. Jiwoo had discovered the Empire's plans and been killed during interrogation. More critically, he'd included copies of the files she'd found, detailed plans for Earth's integration into the Empire. As the Axorian ambassador finished his practice speech about deepening cooperation between their worlds, the doors to the chamber opened. Colonel Do-Hyun Park of South Korea's Military Intelligence Division entered, flanked by representatives from 20 nations. His face revealed nothing as he approached the podium. "Thank you for returning our citizen," he said, his voice steady. "The Axorian Empire will leave Earth orbit within 24 hours. All diplomatic relations are hereby suspended." The ambassador's skin flashed an alarmed yellow. "This is most unexpected. Perhaps in your grief—" "We are not grieving yet," Colonel Park interrupted. "We are preparing." Across the globe, military bases went into immediate lockdown. Commercial flights were grounded worldwide. And beneath the Antarctic ice, in a facility unknown even to most world governments, Project Phoenix moved from theoretical planning to active status. The truth of Jiwoo's death spread quickly, along with the leaked Axorian files. For once, humanity faced a threat so existential that old rivalries were set aside. Former enemies found themselves working side by side in hastily established research centers. The best minds from every nation were quietly gathered, Physicists, engineers, weapons specialists, and strategists. They've given us 6 months before they return with their integration fleet, said Dr. May during the first Phoenix briefing, her hands steady as she brought up holographic projections of Axorian warship schematics, data secretly gathered during the supposed cultural exchange. How can we possibly prepare in 6 months? Asked a general from Brazil. Their technology is centuries beyond ours. Not centuries, corrected Sung Min, the youngest person in the room. At just 26, he had been Jiwu's closest friend and fellow linguistics prodigy. Decades, perhaps, and they've shown us more than they realize. He was right. Every diplomatic visit, every cultural exchange, every seemingly innocent demonstration of Axorian technology had been meticulously recorded and analyzed. The aliens had been careless, believing humans too primitive to understand the principles behind their technology. They hadn't realized that Earth's scientists had been reverse engineering everything they saw. Jiwu sent more than just their invasion plans, Dr. May continued, bringing up complex equations covered in Jiwu's handwriting. She managed to access their weapons specifications. She knew what was coming. For the next 4 months, the world experienced what future historians would call the Great Silence. Social media went quiet as governments implemented controlled internet blackouts, explaining them as infrastructure upgrades. In reality, every available communication channel was dedicated to the Phoenix project. Factory floors around the world were retooled overnight. University laboratories became weapons development centers, and deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, the construction of humanity's response began. "We're not building to match their fleet," Colonel Park explained to the assembled world leaders as they stood in the massive underwater hangar. "We're building one ship, the best ship possible with everything we've learned." Before them stood the EDS Retribution, Earth's first true starship. Unlike the ceremonial diplomatic vessels the Axorians had seen during their visits, this was a weapon designed with a single purpose. "It doesn't look like their ships," noted the Prime Minister of India, studying the angular, almost predatory design. "Because it isn't their ship," replied Tae-Won Lee, the newly appointed Admiral of Earth's First Space Navy. "It's ours. They expect us to either surrender or attempt to copy their technology poorly. They don't expect this." The Retribution incorporated everything humanity had secretly learned. Its hull contained materials developed by studying Axorian shuttle fragments. Its weapon systems were based on principles observed during peaceful demonstrations of Axorian mining equipment. But most importantly, it contained innovations the Axorians had never imagined, born from human creativity and the desperate need to survive. "Will it be enough?" asked someone in the back. Admiral Lee looked up at the massive ship, remembering the photograph of Jiwu that now hung in the command center, her face smiling, unaware she would become the catalyst for humanity's greatest leap forward. "It has to be," he said simply. "We get one chance." 2 months later, when the Axorian integration fleet arrived in Earth orbit, 5 massive ships against a seemingly defenseless planet, they broadcast their terms of surrender with confident superiority. Their sensors showed no significant orbital defenses, no fleet to oppose them. They had no way of detecting the Retribution hidden in the dark side of the moon, its revolutionary stealth systems making it invisible to Axorian technology. They couldn't know that the primitive humans had not spent the last 6 months in panic or futile resistance attempts, but in focused, unified preparation. Admiral Lee looked at his crew, the best pilots, engineers, and tactical officers from every nation on Earth. On the main screen, the Axorian flagship dominated the view, its elegant curves a stark contrast to the Retribution's functional design. "For Jiwu," he said quietly. "For Earth." Then he gave the order that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The bridge of the Axorian flagship Celestial Dominion hummed with quiet confidence as Supreme Commander Vax Kor surveyed the blue planet on the main view screen. Earth looked peaceful from orbit, deceptively so considering what was about to happen. The commander's skin rippled with patterns of satisfied green as status reports flowed in from his subordinates. "All 5 warships in formation, Supreme Commander," reported his second-in-command. The The humans have made no attempts at communication since our arrival. As expected, VaxCore replied. They've had 6 months to prepare, yet our scans show only primitive defense satellites and a handful of their crude missile systems, not even worth targeting. The Exorian Empire had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy, but Earth represented something unique, a world rich in resources, with a species advanced enough to be useful as labor, but not advanced enough to truly resist. The humans' response to Jiwoo Kim's death had surprised them initially, but their subsequent silence had confirmed what the Empire already believed. Humans were emotional, but ultimately rational enough to recognize the futility of resistance. Prepare. The integration announcement, VaxCore ordered. Remind them that cooperation will result in minimal casualties. Just as the communications officer began the broadcast, alarms blared across the bridge. The tactical display erupted with warning signals as something massive appeared behind their formation, seemingly materializing out of nowhere. "Impossible!" shouted the sensor officer, his skin flashing anxious yellow. "There's a vessel behind." "Thus it wasn't there 3 seconds ago." "Show me," demanded VaxCore. The view screen shifted to reveal a ship unlike any the Exorians had seen before. Where Exorian vessels were elegant and curved, this ship was angular and aggressive. Where their ships gleamed with ceremonial markings, this vessel was matte black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Most troubling of all, it was nearly the size of VaxCore's flagship, something the humans shouldn't have been capable of building. The words "Ed's Retribution" were emblazoned across its hull in stark white letters. "They shouldn't have this technology," VaxCore muttered, his composure cracking slightly. "How did they hide this from our sensors?" Before anyone could answer, the communications officer reported, "They're hailing us, Commander." On screen, Admiral Taewon Lee's face appeared on the view screen. The human's expression was calm, almost serene. Behind him stood a bridge crew of men and women representing every continent on Earth. "This is Admiral Lee of the Earth Defense. Ship Retribution," he said simply. "You murdered our ambassador, Jiwoo Kim. You plan to enslave our world. We are here to inform you that humanity rejects your terms." VaxCore quickly regained his composure. One ship, however surprising, couldn't stand against 5 Exorian warships that had conquered dozens of civilizations. "Your resistance is noted. Human but futile," he replied. "Your single vessel cannot hope to—" "We didn't come to negotiate," Admiral Lee interrupted. "We came to demonstrate the consequences of underestimating humanity." The transmission cut off abruptly. VaxCore barely had time to order battle stations before the Retribution made its first move. The human ship's movement defied Exorian tactical predictions. Instead of maintaining distance, the logical choice for an outmatched vessel, it accelerated directly toward the Exorian formation. Energy readings spiked across its hull in patterns the Exorian sensors couldn't interpret. "Target their propulsion systems," VaxCore ordered. "Disable but don't destroy. The vessel will make a valuable addition to our fleet." 5 Exorian ships fired simultaneously, energy weapons converging on the human vessel. In any previous encounter, such a barrage would have ended the battle instantly. Instead, the Retribution's hull seemed to shimmer as the energy weapon struck, not penetrating, but somehow being absorbed and redirected. "Their shields are based on our own technology," the science officer reported with disbelief. "But they've modified the oscillation patterns. Our targeting computers can't compensate." Before the Exorians could adjust their attack, the Retribution fired. Not the crude missiles or laser weapons the Empire expected, but something entirely new. Focused beams of bluish energy lanced out from multiple points on the Earthship, each striking with surgical precision. The smallest Exorian vessel, the Sunset Claw, shuddered as its main power systems went dark. The attack hadn't destroyed the ship. It had somehow selectively disabled specific systems, leaving the crew alive but the vessel helpless. "How are they targeting our power distribution nodes?" demanded VaxCore. "Those schematics are classified beyond all levels." On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Lee watched the first Exorian ship go dark with grim satisfaction. Jiwoo's final data packet had included more than just invasion plans. It contained detailed schematics of Exorian warships, including their vulnerabilities. "Target the next vessel's weapon systems only," he ordered. "Continue the pattern." The human crew worked with practiced precision. Unlike the Axorians, who relied heavily on automated systems, the Retribution's operations combined advanced technology with human intuition and adaptability. Each crew member had trained for months in simulators designed to replicate this exact scenario. One by one, the remaining Axorian vessels suffered the same fate as the first. Not destroyed, but systematically disabled in a display of technological precision that shocked the Imperial forces. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were demonstrating mastery of technologies the Axorians believed were centuries beyond them. On the flagship's bridge, Vax Kor watched with growing horror as his fleet became effectively neutralized in less than 20 minutes. When the Retribution finally approached the Celestial Dominion, his flagship was the only vessel still fully operational. "We should retreat," urged his second-in-command. "Return with the main fleet." "No," Vax Kor replied, his skin now pale with realization. "Look at how they attacked. They could have destroyed us all, but they chose to disable our ships precisely. They're showing us something." The communications officer reported, "They're hailing us again, Commander." Admiral Lee's face reappeared on screen, still calm but with steel in his eyes. "Your ships are disabled, but your life support systems remain intact," he said. "Unlike you, we don't solve our problems by eliminating those weaker than ourselves. Here are our terms. The Axorian Empire will recognize Earth as a sovereign power, not a resource world. You will provide reparations for Ji-Woo Kim's murder, and you will grant us membership in your Galactic Council, not as a protectorate, but as equals." Vax Kor stared at the human in disbelief. "You expect the Empire to capitulate to a single victory?" "No," Admiral Lee replied. "We expect you to calculate the costs of continued conflict with a species that accomplished in 6 months what you believed would take centuries, a species that values cooperation but is fully capable of total war, a concept your empire has never truly faced." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "We reverse-engineered your technology while improving upon it. Imagine what we'll build next." As the full meaning of those words registered, Vax Kor's skin turned the pale blue of defeat. In all the Empire's history, no species had ever advanced so quickly or fought so effectively on their first encounter. If they could build the Retribution in 6 months, what would they create given years or decades? For the first time in his long career, Supreme Commander Vax Kor realized he faced not just a battle he might lose, but a war the Empire could not win. "Send word to the Imperial capital," he said quietly to his communications officer. "Tell them we are prepared to discuss the humans' terms." 1 year after the battle that changed everything, Earth's Führer, Zent official delegation stood in the Great Hall of Harmony on Axoria Prime. The magnificent crystal dome above cast rainbow patterns across the gathered representatives from over 300 worlds. At the center of the hall, Admiral Tae-won, Lee and Colonel Do-hyun Park watched as the Axorian High Chancellor signed the final document with ceremonial flourish. The Treaty of Earth, as it would be known throughout the galaxy, officially recognized humanity as equals in the interstellar community. The document that Ji-Woo Kim died to make possible was now reality. "With this act," announced the High Chancellor, his skin rippling with formal patterns of blue and gold, "we welcome Earth as the newest full member of the Galactic Council." Applause echoed through the hall, though keen observers noted many Axorian dignitaries seemed to participate more from obligation than enthusiasm. The speed of Earth's ascension had unsettled the established order of things. After the ceremony, Admiral Lee stood by a window overlooking the capital city, the same view Ji-Woo had marveled at during her first days here. A familiar figure approached, Koltar, once Ji-Woo's guide, now Earth's most important ally on Axoria. "Your people continue to surprise us," Koltar said quietly. "No species has ever moved from first contact to council membership in less than 2 decades. "You've done it in 18 months, Lee smiled slightly. "We had proper motivation." "Indeed." Koltar's skin shifted to a reflective pattern that signaled respectful remembrance. "The memorial will be unveiled tomorrow. Many still question the wisdom of placing it so prominently in the embassy plaza? Those questions were addressed in the treaty negotiations, Lee replied firmly. Her memorial stands where all can see it. Later that evening, Earth's delegation gathered in their newly established embassy, a striking building that blended Exorian crystal architecture with distinctly Earth-inspired elements. Unlike the temporary diplomatic quarters Jiwoo had known, this was a permanent statement of humanity's presence among the stars. The reports from the trade negotiations are promising, said Su Jin, Earth's newly appointed ambassador. Once a respected economics professor, she now represented humanity to hundreds of alien civilizations. 17 worlds have requested direct technological exchange programs. It seems our reputation for innovation has spread. And what about security concerns? Asked Colonel Park, ever focused on potential threats. Ambassador Su Jin's expression grew more serious. There are factions within the Empire who consider our rise troubling. Nothing direct, but our intelligence suggests some military commanders feel the treaty was premature. Let them, Admiral Lee said. The retribution was just the beginning. He was right. Back on Earth, the knowledge gained from reverse engineering Exorian technology had sparked a renaissance of innovation. The United Earth Space Defense Force had grown from one ship to a fleet of 12, each incorporating improvements on the original Retribution design. More importantly, humanity had learned to combine technologies in ways the older, more established species hadn't considered. We've received another report from the Cultural Integration Team, said Hyun-ki, Jiwoo's former mentor, who now led efforts to understand the many civilizations humanity had suddenly found itself among. Over 60 species have requested our entertainment broadcasts. Apparently our music and stories are quite novel to them. Jiwoo would have loved that, Su Jin said softly. She always believed cultural exchange would be as important as technology. Next morning, crowds gathered in the embassy plaza for the memorial unveiling. At the High Chancellor's insistence, representatives from all council races attended, a sign of how seriously the Exorians were taking their treaty obligations. The memorial itself was deceptively simple, a life-sized statue of Jiwoo Kim, cast in a special alloy that captured and reflected light in a way that made it seem almost alive. She stood with one hand extended toward the stars, her expression both hopeful and determined. Admiral Lee stepped forward to address the gathered dignitaries and citizens. The past year had aged him. Silver now streaked his once black hair, and lines had deepened around his eyes, but his voice remained strong and clear. Jiwoo Kim came to Exoria as a student and friend, he began. She believed in the promise of cooperation between our worlds. When she discovered that promise was false, she gave her life to warn us. Murmurs rippled through the Exorian crowd. The official acknowledgement of Jiwoo's murder had been one of the most contentious points of the treaty negotiations. But today, we look forward, not back, Lee continued. Jiwoo's sacrifice has led to something she would have valued more than vengeance, true understanding between our peoples. As the covering fell away from the memorial, sunlight caught the statue, sending prismatic reflections across the plaza. At the base, an inscription in both human and Exorian script read, "Her death taught the stars that humanity's greatest strength is not our technology, but what we will do for one of our own." The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence, but the day's most powerful moment came afterward. Young Exorian students, part of a new cultural exchange program named in Jiwoo's honor, approached the memorial with small tokens, colored crystals that in Exorian tradition symbolized respect for a teacher. On the edge of the plaza, Sub-Commander Neklar, now demoted and disgraced for his role in Jiwoo's death, watched the proceedings with unreadable eyes before slipping away into the crowd. That evening, the first joint Exorian Human Scientific Summit convened in the great university of Exoria Prime. Innovations that would have been unthinkable a year earlier were now being freely shared. Medical techniques from a dozen worlds were being adapted to save lives on Earth, while human approaches to computing and engineering were revolutionizing Exorian industries. In a quiet moment during the reception, Admiral Lee found himself standing next to the High Chancellor. "Your species adapts with remarkable speed," the Chancellor observed. "Some find it unsettling. Change often is, Lee replied. But consider the alternative. Had your empire succeeded in making Earth just another resource world, you would have gained minerals and labor but lost something far more valuable. And what is that? Lee gestured toward a group of human and Axorian scientists excitedly discussing a new propulsion theory. Partnership, innovation, the strength that comes from diversity rather than conformity. He paused. Ji-Woo understood that before any of us. The High Chancellor's skin shifted to a pattern Lee had never seen before, one that the newly updated translation software identified as reluctant wisdom. Perhaps, the Chancellor said after a long moment, the universe had grown too comfortable before humanity joined us. As stars appeared in the Axorian sky, visible through the university's transparent dome, Lee looked up and thought about how quickly everything had changed. From a single curious girl learning an alien language to humanity taking its place among the stars, all in less than 2 years. Somewhere in that vast sea of light, Earth's growing fleet patrolled. New ships were being launched, new worlds discovered. Humanity had been forced to advance centuries in months, but in doing so had found not just the means to defend itself, but perhaps its true purpose in the greater universe. Ji-Woo would have been proud.